That's true fraternity. And I thank certainly all of you for doing what you've done for Bob in his time, difficult time. And those of you that were deacon class and diocesan brothers and others that were able to make it to that funeral, it was all done out of fraternal love. That's what fraternity means. And you have made me very proud to know that you know what fraternity means. So, gentlemen, my topic for this Rector's Conference, I was really inspired, I must say, last week by Father Dietrich's spiritual conference. And so my topic today, yes, you guessed it, is about climate change. No, just kidding. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, if I can find a little bit about what it means to love Our Lady. In a couple of weeks, November 7th, Father Fred Miller is going to be coming to the Mount. Some of you know him, past faculty member here at the Mount, and I've known him since 1987 when he, as a seminarian, he introduced me to St. Louis Marie de Montfort and began my process of the consecration to our Lord Jesus Christ through Our Lady in the Montfortian way. And I've had contact and friendship with him over the years. So he's going to be here to give a short Marian seminar aimed at helping any seminarian who wants to make the consecration to Jesus Christ through Our Lady. He will help you to do that through this seminar. It's a Saturday morning. It'll be all morning. You'll see the schedule coming up if you haven't seen it already. And those of you that have already made the consecration or may have heard Father Miller are more than welcome to attend. And I want to use this time and this conference to speak about the importance of Our Lady in the life of a priest, about Marian consecration, with the hopes that you will decide to be a part of that day. It is an option, yes, but I want to strongly encourage it, and certainly to speak today about its importance and upon Our Lady's life and our relationship with her, how important that is to us. I begin at the Annunciation. Now, you might think to yourself, he's kind of beginning on a little spiritual topic here, and that's true because Rector's Conferences can and should integrate all four pillars, certainly. And some of my topics will be a little bit more spiritual, others more human, more pastoral, but this one might have a little more of a spiritual element to it, but I think nevertheless is important. And as I said, I begin at the Annunciation. Several years ago, when I was working in Rome, I had the opportunity to visit the Holy House of Loreto. It's reported to be the very house of Our Lady that was brought by the angels, probably by the De Angelis family, to Italy to preserve it and protect it. And when I entered into that house, it's within the basilica itself, and you go into, the house is inside the basilica, so you go into the basilica and then you go into this little house. There were a lot of people kind of going into the house and going right out. Entrance, exit. They'd spend just a few seconds. But as I got in there, I kind of pulled back a little bit and went to the back of the room and had an opportunity just to stay there for a moment, for a few moments to pray. And I noticed on the front of the altar that was there in the house a saying in Latin, Hic verbum caro factum est. Now, we know verbum caro factum est, the word was made flesh. But it was the first word that struck me in Latin, hic. And I know all you Latin scholars know what that means. Right? Here, the word was made flesh. Here, verbum caro factum est. There, the word was made flesh. That Annunciation and the incarnation of the Lord changed everything. Changed the whole universe, changes our lives. The Annunciation is the most depicted scene in all of art history. You might have seen the movie The Theory of Everything. I haven't actually seen all of it, and I'm not going to make a comment or encourage you to see it or not, but I just thought it was interesting, what it was about the famous astrophysicist Stephen Hawking and his pursuit of finding a formula, a theory, that explains everything in the universe. His whole life is kind of driven by that, a mathematical theory that can explain everything. We've got the answer. We already know. It's not a mathematical theory. It's a person who's the center of the universe and explains everything. And he became flesh here in the house of Loreto at the Annunciation in the womb of Mary. And if he chooses a home, which is more than just the physical building of the house of Loreto, it was Our Lady herself. If he chooses a home, if the theory about everything, the person about everything, comes to us in the womb of a virgin from Nazareth, we better pay attention to her. Right? If you're courting a young lady, you know, the best way to do that, I'm not giving you this advice, but I'm going to give this advice maybe to some young men you know. If you really find a nice Catholic young girl, what do you got to do? Impress mom, right? Impress mom, right? Get to know the mother. And Mary's whole life, all of her privileges come from her role as being the mother of God. The theory, the person that explains everything in the universe, came to her. And that's why the directory for the ministry and life of priests says this: the priestly spirituality may not be considered complete if it does not take into serious consideration the testament of Christ crucified, when he willed to entrust his mother to the beloved disciple, and through him to all the priests called to continue his work of redemption. Your spirituality, and the spirituality of a priest, can certainly have certain characteristics. It has certain basic kind of fundamental qualities, and it might take on certain turns, a more Dominican or Jesuit or Franciscan, and certain emphases because of your own kind of background and personality. There's an element of a priestly spirituality that's given, but then also something personal. But none of that is complete without Mary. No priest can really say and truly have a priestly spirituality and a priestly life, oh, I don't really have a Marian devotion. I don't really know Our Lady. It's not complete without her. God became man here in her. So it's not something secondary, but essential to priesthood. It's not something secondary to priesthood, but our devotion to Our Lady is essential. It's not complete without her. A priest without Mary is an orphan. A priest without Mary is an orphan. She plays an intimate part of your formation. She is, first of all, the exemplar of what it means to say yes to a vocation, is she not? Pastoris Dava Vobis says, the creature who more than any other has lived the full truth of vocation is Mary, the Virgin Mother. And she did so in intimate communion with Christ. No one has responded with a love greater than hers to the immense love of God. This is a time of both discerning and responding to a vocation. She is your exemplar. And then all of priestly formation, too, must have this constant reference to Mary. Ongoing formation, as we call it, must become ever more deeply Marian. What begins here doesn't stop here. It continues on as priests. You know, the old saying, I think, is very true. As a seminarian, so as a priest. And we used to say in the Congregation for Bishops, as a priest, so a bishop. It all continues. It does continue. So every aspect of priestly formation can be referred to Mary, the human being who has responded better than any other to God's call. Mary became both the servant and the disciple of the Word, to the point of conceiving in her heart and in her flesh the Word made man, so as to give him to mankind. Mary was called to educate the one eternal priest. Think about that. She was called to educate the one eternal priest, who became docile and subject to her motherly authority. With her example and intercession, the Blessed Virgin Mary keeps vigilant watch over the growth of vocations and priestly life in the church. A priest without Mary is an orphan. So devotion to Our Lady is essential, not just to the life of a Christian, but is really especially essential to a priest, and therefore as a seminarian, because as a seminarian, so you will be as a priest. Why is this so important to us? Well, first of all, because in having this devotion to Our Lady, we live as sons. We live our divine sonship. There's a real crisis in the world, as we know, in fatherhood, and in people really understanding and experiencing who they are as a son and daughter. Not only in a natural sense, but in a supernatural way. You know, the one thing that distinguishes, if you will, the persons of the Trinity is their relations, right? You guys are learning that. What distinguishes one person in the Blessed Trinity from the other is their relation. And what is it that characterizes Jesus Christ? He's son, right? His sonship, his filiation. That is of who he is. He is son. So if we are to be other Christ, most especially as priests who are alter Christus, another Christ, the one thing that ought to characterize us is that we are sons too, and a son needs a father and a mother. How can we not treat our mother? How can we not enter into relationship, have a devotion to her? Marian devotion is kind of a thermometer, if you will, of our sense of divine filiation. The more we become sons, if you will, and living that out, the more that we are in love with our mother. I just called my mother today, by the way. She's doing much better, thank you. Much better. We all are in need of living out that motherly devotion. What therefore must distinguish priests is in living as beloved sons of God, is a deep experiential understanding of their identity as God's sons that will enable them to lead the faithful into the same knowledge and experience. When people know that you love the Mother of God, they see you as a son. They recognize that you're living your divine filiation in a very concrete way. Presbyterum Ordinis of the Second Vatican Council says, "Let priests love and venerate with filial devotion and veneration this Mother of the eternal High Priest." Love and venerate with filial devotion, sonship, and veneration this Mother of the eternal High Priest. And finally, another reason why we ought to love our mother is because I love this title of Our Lady, the refugium peccatorum, right? The refuge of sinners. Because we're sinners too. And we need a mother to wrap us in her mantle, to intercede for us, to guide us, to help us repent and convert. You know, there's a beautiful scene, if you've seen the movie The Passion of the Christ. Remember there's a scene where Peter, after having betrayed Christ, who does he go to? He goes to mother. He even uses that term in Mel Gibson's movie, right? He comes to her and calls her mother, right? Looking for some forgiveness. She is the refugium peccatorum, the refuge of sinners. She's never afraid or shocked of our sins, and ever more reason why we need her. Also, priests should have a loving devotion to Our Lady because the incarnation, that which happened at the Holy House of Loreto, that place in which the incarnation took place, we've got to remember that continues today. The incarnation, as Pope John Paul II in a certain sense, continues today. It continues in the Eucharist, he says. He says the Eucharist is the continuation of the incarnation. And how does that happen without a priest? You know, Mary and a priest can ask the same question. You know, will you give flesh and blood to the Son of God? They can be asked the same question. That's kind of what the angel Gabriel is saying to Our Lady. Will you give flesh and blood to the Son of God? And every morning, a priest is kind of asked the same question before Mass. Will you give the Son of God flesh and blood? And it's really to Mary and to the priest that this question can be asked in a very, very unique way. And it's really Mary and the priest who can uniquely say, although the priest says it sacramentally, of course, but we can say with Our Lady, this is my body. This is my blood. You see the connection. You see the union. You see the relationship that is there as a priest. And so in formation for priestly ministry, fostering this Marian devotion and this filial love and this dedication to Christ and kind of carrying out this continuation of the incarnation should be marked by Mary. Should be characterized by something, a Marian devotion. So, what about consecration? What Father Miller is going to speak about is a particular kind of consecration or way, the Montfortan way, St. Louis Marie de Montfort's way of consecration. Why is that important for us, for you, especially seminarians and as future priests? Could we do without it? I would certainly say that no one should have to go through, of course, this particular kind of consecration, or I'm not going to force it on you either. It's a very good way, but in some way that path has to be taken, I think, in order to be a happy, holy, zealous priest. Our spirituality is incomplete without some way of certainly dedication to Christ in a Marian way. What Father Miller will be talking about is a particular way to do that. It's a very powerful way to do that. And it is a very fruitful way as well. Why do we need to do this kind of consecration? Well, the term consecration, of course, has its root in the word holy, to kind of make holy, or to con or cum, to make something holy, set something apart for the sake of holiness. It fundamentally means that consecration means that a person or a place or a thing is sanctified. It's kind of made holy, kind of set apart for holy activity. So an act of consecration is an act by which one willingly wishes to be set apart, made holy, to serve a particular purpose. Our Lady's life was the fullest of a life consecrated, set apart for the purpose of serving the Lord. She was the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the place upon which the Lord fully overshadowed, right? Like the meeting tent in the desert. So by following, if you will, her example, we do the same. We consecrate, right? We willingly give ourselves over to the act of God of making us holy. We don't make ourselves holy, but we give ourselves over to His action of making us holy. Do you remember those glow balls that you used to have as a kid? You know, you'd put it in the light, you turn off the lights, and you bounce it up and down, and it was glowing, right? Well, in some way, that's what's happening. It's that light of Christ that's enlightening us, making us, changing us, making us holy, if you will. But we have to put ourselves into that light. And that process of putting ourselves into the light, which is Christ, is the consecration, that willingness to receive the light. This is what Mary did at the Annunciation. Let it be done to me according to your word. And she was set apart for the most sacred purpose of all. By following her example, then, we too can completely give ourselves to Christ in a fundamental way by which he consecrates us. We give our lives in him in service and in love. And we are more than dedicated to him, to his sacred purpose. And I will guarantee to you, you can take this to the bank, making a consecration to Our Lady makes this process, this clarity of vocation, much better, stronger, and clearer. It does. It does. It is, in a certain sense, an act of consecration is the continuation of the Annunciation from Mary's perspective. Right? Our Lady said fiat to the Word, become flesh. Every consecration is a handing over of ourselves to the incarnate Word, that he might become flesh, or that we might no longer live, but Christ might live in us. A consecration, particularly that of St. Louis Marie de Montfort, is a way for you and for me to continue our baptism and to deepen it. That was that first kind of consecration that took place in our lives when we were baptized. We were made holy. We were saved from original sin. All right? We were made a child of God. We entered the church. It was the first kind of consecration. Well, when we renew that consecration in this consecration, we will renew that dedication to Christ through Mary. It renews, it lives, it deepens our response to that first consecration of baptism. St. Louis Marie de Montfort, as Father Miller will explain, really had in his mind a renewal of baptism. It was really a renewal of those promises, a living of it out. We're all aware of the neo-catechumenal way, too, and that's one of their kind of, if you will, charisms that they bring to the church, this need for already baptized people to kind of go back and renew their baptism, their commitment already to Christ in baptism, and to start to live it out in an ever deeper way. So I'm not going to here go through, of course, what those steps are, what St. Louis Marie de Montfort says about it. That's what Father Miller will be saying in November. But I want to encourage you very much to take advantage of that workshop, that morning workshop, and an opportunity to speak with Father Miller at lunch that day. And if you find it in your heart to make the consecration, I would encourage you to do so. If you've already made it, to renew it. But above all, to remember that you cannot be a priest without her. You will be an orphan. Finally, I just want to personally encourage all of us to do what we can to deepen our dedication to Mary. We live on her mountain, and this area was called Mary's Mountain, I think, even before Father Dubois got here. Right? By the way, this is the date of his consecration in New York, when he became Bishop of New York today. So I remembered him today, and I think this mountain was already considered to be Mary's Mountain even before he arrived. And this mountain has been marked by her presence, and I think a lot of graces from God through her have entered, especially the many, many years of seminarians coming through this particular seminary dedicated to her. And I want to encourage you to continue your Marian devotion, to pray the rosary, to make pilgrimages to Marian shrines, like some of you did with the Legion of Mary, or might do personally, or just going up to the grotto every once in a while, to greet her images that are all over this chapel, this seminary, and even certainly in parts of the campus. To wear the scapular or miraculous medal. To say 3 Hail Marys for purity before going to bed. To pray the Angelus. We have a beautiful tradition of singing the Salve together as a community. To pray the Memorare. To read good, sound, solid literature about Our Lady. To just really be a good son. I end with a little story that I like to tell about a boy who, with his mother, attended the Oberammergau play, right? Which is this play, a passion play that they put on every 10 years in the town of Oberammergau. And this little boy with his mother was watching the play, and he was just fascinated by it. And they got to the point where Judas betrays Christ. And he rushes in on stage, of course, to the chief priests and elders with his sack of money. And he says this to the elders on stage. He says, "I did wrong to deliver up an innocent man." And of course the actors playing the Pharisees and Sadducees say, "Well, what is this to us? It's your affair." And then Judas flings the money in the bag down on the stage, and he runs off the side of the stage. And the little boy, in this silence, as that scene begins to sink into everyone there, in the midst of that silence, this little boy speaks up, and he says over the crowd, "Mommy, Mommy, why doesn't he go to Mary?" It's a great question. Why don't we?